thanks everyone. I know you've only got an hour to go before food and drinks, so I appreciate you staying around to hear from me. So my background, I've been in gaming for about 2 decades now, across a range of different companies, kind of living all the way from disc and cartridge through PC online and now mobile live services, free-to-play games. And currently I'm the VP of Marketing for KingsIsle Entertainment. So I'm share a little bit of a case study on Animal Cove, which is a game we launched last year. It's a match 3 with an island decoration component and then a storyline based on the animal characters in the game. So we did get featured. It was featured at launch the week of August 16th, that Thursday. So featured on both iOS and Android. In both cases in their new games, or in the case of Android, new and updated games categories. So how did we get featured? This is, I think, sometimes a challenge for independent developers. You know, we're a smaller marketing team. We don't have someone who has the bandwidth to be fully dedicated to our relationship with these platforms. So we worked with an agency called Mobile Game Partners. They were and continue to be a good partner for us as far as insights on what's happening on the store platforms for mobile. The biggest thing I would say is we began pitching early. So we started sharing information with them about 6 months before launch, provided them a one-pager to share with the platforms 12 to 16 weeks before launch, then kind of a final pitch about 2 months out, and then we updated from there with what was unique in the game. In our case, really the story component was what we felt made our game different. And then we backed it up with ongoing updates around our soft launch data, particularly trying to show the positive trend. And I think the key challenge here is that, as we all know, there's hundreds of games a day launching, thousands of games a week. So if you wait for the platforms to notice you, they won't. So you have to find a way to be proactive. If you have the bandwidth to do it internally, do it. If you don't, find someone who can help you. So what was the actual impact of this? Because I think this feeds into what we needed to do afterwards. So we saw an interesting trend where, installs were massively higher on Android, order of magnitude higher, but the revenue was actually fairly similar between the two. So we saw a higher monetizing cohort on iOS, but a much bigger cohort on Android. A big piece of that was the result of retention. So the blue on the right is our baseline organics. The green on the left are the cohort that came in during the feature. So on the iOS side, there's only about a 16% difference lower. On the Android side, that was about 40%. So a significantly lower retention, which just means they're not around as long. And then from a monetization standpoint, we also found a much different mix of geography for where people came from. So, compared to our soft launch audiences where we had been in very specific markets to give us a sense of monetization, we saw a very different mix despite it being globally featured, where on Android it was, India, Russia, Brazil, lower monetizing markets that really dominated. And then on iOS, US, Canada, Netherlands, sort of higher monetization markets. A big learning for us was around consumption compared to what we had seen during soft launch. So we launched with 300 levels. Having looked at competitors with similar games, that was in the ballpark of what they had launched with. Based on the consumption we saw during soft launch, we anticipated that would give us 6 to 8 weeks of runway, and we had a plan in place to continue adding levels. What we actually saw, this is our D14 progression. I apologize, the numbers are a little bit small, but the purple are paying users. The red are free-to-play players. And those last 2 columns, that's our 95th and top 1% of consumption. So within 2 weeks, the top 1% of paying players had consumed all 300 levels, and 5% of paying players had consumed at least 2/3, and clearly quite a few were on track to exceed what we had ready to go. So this was a big learn for us that we needed to be ready to follow the feature with a significant runway of content, because as it was, I think we somewhat reduced the value of that feature opportunity for ourselves because we didn't have as much content available for people, which I know is a challenge. There's often a rush to get the game to market, a rush to get out, but this is definitely something you need to consider. What's going to happen to those players after that week of the feature or after that first month? So other learns we had, where you're featured matters. So we didn't see quite as big a scale of users as we had hoped for, but we weren't in one of those big featured story kind of bespoke spots. We were in the list, and depending on the player and what other games they had, it's all become very algorithmic. So how far up the list they saw us varied. It's hard to stand out, and the bar for distinctiveness is always rising, right? So when you want to catch the platform's attention, what was unique and interesting 6 months or a year ago is no longer unique, because people move so quickly in this industry to follow up on what's been successful. So I think we were successful in that we really pushed hard. Our background is in MMO development before we moved to mobile, so we have a lot of experience with story and live services. So we did a nice job on the story piece, and I think that's what helped us catch the eye. But if we come back with our next game and kind of have that same pitch, I wouldn't expect we'd be successful. So the other thing that we were trying to take a look at was kind of what's the ongoing effect on organics. So during the feature period, we saw about 90% organic rate on Google and about just under 70% on iOS. Afterwards, kind of the baseline we've seen since is about 60% on Android and more like just over 40% on iOS. We haven't, a little bit of an exception I'll talk about on the Android side, but in general, we haven't seen anything compared to our prior games to suggest that the fact we got featured significantly changed the organic trajectory after the feature. So I think, I've heard a lot of teams and people I've talked to who are sort of like, oh, if we can just get featured, then it's all going to skyrocket from there and we don't need to do anything else. That is very much not the case. You will have a great week. Everyone in the building will be very excited. We certainly were, but then you need to be ready to do some hard after to keep new players coming in. Historically, it's a 90-day window for featuring. One of the surprises we had is that is shifting, particularly with the Google Play Store. They are becoming a little more fluid and dynamic with that. So we had, we'd been communicating on an ongoing basis, sharing updates of performance, new content that was coming, and we had actually built a schedule of game updates, both content and feature updates, to align to that expected 90-day cadence. In my time at Gree, that was something that was very successful for us in working with platforms that we, as we came into that window when they were ready to look at us again, we had substantive updates to share with them. So that's something I would recommend, but we actually found that in this case, because of how they're shifting, that Google went ahead and featured us again a month later. So they featured us this time in the casual category. We didn't know it was coming. Neither we nor MGP got any particular heads up from them until sort of the week of, when all of a sudden we got you've been certified for featuring. So we sort of went, okay, well, we'll see what this means. It had, as you can see, a big impact. So this is our daily installs. And in this case, so it looks like the organic rate lifted. What's a little bit fuzzy there is that we were also increasing our spend on Android at the time. We were seeing strong performance on Android as a platform for our game, so we were spending into that. So it's a little bit hard to unpack how much of that improving organic rate came from this feature happening and how much of it came from the mix of increased spending and additive features in the game. So we also added features like clubs that really encouraged collaboration and bringing friends into the game. So I wouldn't feel comfortable saying that lift was necessarily a result of the feature, but it may have played a role. From a scale standpoint, because I think we also had no idea what to expect here, and I'm presuming others don't. We saw about 26% of the volume, so about a quarter of the volume that we had seen on the launch feature on the follow-up feature. So again, if you're doing your business plan and you're saying, great, we're going to get featured, and then we're going to get featured again, and that'll be the same kind of thing, and then again and again, that's probably not a responsible way to do your planning. Assume that you may get featured again, but you're probably not going to see as big an impact the second time around, the third time around that you saw at the start. Now, on the flip side, there was definitely a benefit to being in the casual category for us as a match 3 game, in that we saw a much better revenue performance. So we saw more than 2.5 times better revenue per users at day 30. So actually, despite having only a quarter of the audience from our launch feature, we saw almost 75% of the day 30 revenue that we had seen from the launch feature. So this turned out to be really beneficial for us, and certainly as we move forward, trying to be proactive about how our games, when we work across different genres, map to kind of genre areas of interest is something that we're going to try and pitch around down the road. We also saw something interesting happen with retention. So again, this is what our comparison between our baseline organics and our launch feature organics. We actually had better retention among the follow-up feature organics than what we see on an ongoing basis, which again, huge surprise for us. We presumed that we'd see something very similar to what we'd seen at launch, maybe a little bit better, but certainly didn't think it would be superior to what we were getting on an ongoing basis. And then similarly, again, despite being a global feature, ignore the terminology a little bit. So the 1.50 was our launch build. So that top is the launch featuring that we've already talked about. The bottom is the ongoing organic that we talked about. And then the middle is casual featuring. And the casual featuring audience looks much more similar to our ongoing organic audience. So I think it just speaks to that being in that category, people who are finding us on an organic ongoing basis are doing it because they're interested in that style of game. And similarly, someone who's coming to, look at what's being featured in casual or, other kind of genre specific feature setups is looking for the same. So we saw, this I think speaks to why we saw such better revenue performance and retention performance. So what were some of our primary takeaways? First, that featuring still matters. So, I know there's a lot of talk and concern and disruption because as the platforms have made different changes about what's presented where, for how long, from what standpoint, it still made a big difference. It had a meaningful impact on our profitability during that time. It certainly, increased our user base and was also, just a huge win for us as a team to kind of have that visibility and awareness, and really drove enthusiasm for what we know, as a number of the other great presenters have talked about, is really an ongoing journey of live ops. So having that success moment for the team is really motivational to keep everyone moving forward, and definitely, you're going to want to make featuring still part of your marketing plan with any platform you're working with. However, the ongoing effect is limited. So work towards it, take the win, get the benefit from it, but don't presume that just doing that will bring you all the way home, because it won't. And then maximize the opportunity. So I think this was the biggest learn for us, is that really the bar has moved as far as what level of content volume and what level of systems depth you need at launch to really take advantage of that feature. We've since added more to the game, both from a content and a system standpoint, and every addition we've made has improved the revenue per user of the game, has improved the revenue per playing player of the game. And I think if we went back in time, we might have done the math slightly differently on our timing to market versus the level of depth that we have. Obviously, there are other business considerations that come into that timing that can force your hand a bit, but I think when you're looking at historical examples, assume that whatever they launched with, you probably need more. That's just, unfortunately, the reality of an ongoing evolution in the business. And then plan for your follow-ups. So, think about how you're going to re-engage any platform that you're working with. Think about how you're going to leverage not only your marketing plan, but in partnership, with the game development teams, or if you are a game development team, aligning your content releases, your feature releases around featuring opportunities, because these will be great visibility opportunities for your game. And that's it. I think I'm 45 seconds ahead. So if people have questions, we have time for that. And if you don't have questions, I'll put it down to the desire to get to food and drink and not a judgment of me. All right, thank you all so much. I appreciate it.
Oh, I have one question.
All right, not getting out of here so easily.
Because it's obviously also about marketing beyond the feature.
Yeah.
So what do you do generally also in terms of marketing?
Except
for getting a refeature.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So, we had a plan in place both starting at launch and ongoing for paid user acquisition. I think, like a lot of people, really started with Facebook as our anchor platform for that, and used that to really calibrate what the CPIs looked like. We had comparison points from soft launch, and then as soon as possible started diversifying into other networks, both diversifying networks and diversifying geography. That's, I think, one of the places where we've found the most kind of little pockets of wins is by looking at different territories, different geography, where the CPIs may be lower and the revenue per user may be lower, but you might have a delta there that's different. So we've found pockets of opportunity, and when we find them, we spend into them. And I think what was nice about sort of thinking about the feature as part of that is the feature kind of gave us a little bit of user volume air cover while we were figuring out what channels were going to work the best for us for acquisition, and then that is ongoing to today, to just keep trying new networks, keep trying new places as we go.
Well, thank you very much, Dave.
Thank you.
Okay.